Okay, I think we can get this webinar started. So welcome and thank you everyone for attending this webinar and the opportunity to present our knowledge and findings in the realm of DevSecOps. My name is Shane Parfit, Senior Manager of Product Marketing and Marketing Services here at Security Compass, and we're coming at you from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We have two presenters online today for this webinar. From Security Compass, we have our Research Director, Altaz Villani. Also on the line, we have Hassan Yassar from the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. I will let them introduce themselves and talk about their backgrounds once we get started, but I would like to take this moment to thank them both for being here. So first, a bit of housekeeping. For this webinar, we'll keep the audio lines muted, but feel free to type any questions into the chat or the little Q&A interface in Zoom, and we'll try to address those questions as we go. We'll also open up the audio lines at the end of the presentation for questions. So first, a little bit about Security Compass. For those who don't know about our company, Security Compass is a B2B company focused on application security. So what that means is we help other companies make their software secure. We do that mostly by building security in during the development and deployment process, and we have two main offerings that are focused on that goal. First, we perform a variety of offensive services or adversarial simulations for many large clients, such as pen testing, red teaming, vulnerability assessments. That's done by our advisory services group. The other offering is more on the defensive side. We help organizations develop application security programs that work with Agile and DevOps. At the nucleus of our solution is SD Elements, our policy to execution platform for security and compliance. And we can deliver just-in-time application security training through, for developers through integrations with SD Elements. The Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University is a federally funded research and development center, nonprofit, public-private partnership that conducts research for the U.S. government. They work with partners throughout the U.S. government, the private sector, and academia that enables them to take innovations from concept to practice, closing the gap between research and use. So just a reminder that we will send you a recording of this webinar to all those attending this webinar by the end of the week. We hope you'll learn something from this. If you like this webinar or have any questions about the content, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can reply to the reminder emails or just send an email to info@securitycompass.com. Also, if there is any content or webinars that you'd like to see from us, please let us know and we'll consider it. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Altaz and Hassan to get on with the actual planned content for the webinar. Take it away, Altaz.
Great, thank you, Shane, appreciate it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today on overcoming DevSecOps challenges. This is really intended to be a very practical guide for InfoSec stakeholders, and our hope is that you'll find a number of practical things here that you can take with you and implement this right away within your organizations. A little bit about myself. My name is Altaz. As Shane mentioned, I'm the Research Director at Security Compass. I'm currently involved in a number of different communities, including the IEEE, SafeCode, the Open Group, NMFTA, CIO Strategy Council, and I was previously a Senior Research Director at Infotech Research Group and a Senior Manager at KPMG. My interests are in research, collaboration, teaching, learning, so this is wonderful just to get the chance to share some of what our experience and research has shown. So my hope, again, is that the presentation that we've got here today is going to be quite useful for you. I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Hassan, who will also briefly introduce himself as well.
Hey, thanks, Altaz, and I'm Hassan again. I have been working with the CME almost last 10 years. Also, I'm a faculty member at the ISR and also Heinz College and teaching a software security DevOps. So as the parallel to the Altaz bios, and I have been part of the community involvement, IEEE, and also DevSecOps, this all day DevOps. And since 2010, I do DevOps, DevSecOps, and at the same time, I'm a coder too, I'm a developer. It looks like I'm doing a more management job seems, but still I would like the coding over the weekends, and I love coding, and I would like to have will continue on educating the communities or be part of the community. And I strongly believe that DevSecOps initiatives or DevOps initiative is really a community effort. And that's kind of a passion on my side.
Great, thanks, Hassan. Just moving along and taking a look at the outline that we have. Our outline today will really cover three basic areas. We will start off by looking at an overview of DevSecOps. And then what we're going to do is dive into addressing some specific challenges. And as you'll see, we've broken up these challenges into 5 categories. And within each of these categories, we're going to share 3 specific subcategories. So there's a wealth of information here. And we will bring all of this out to you as an overall sort of a framework. And finally, we're going to provide some guidance on sustaining DevOps within your organization.
So before starting DevOps, really we have to understand what DevOps it is, because you may heard many naming conventions like a Sec DevOps or DevSecOps or DevOps Sec or Secure DevOps, all around the DevOps concept. And we have to really know what the DevOps it is. I maybe you already know there's some sort of, doing your organization at DevOps is a foundational work. And there is no way to have a single way of defining DevOps, kind of like a 3-dimensional thinking for me. And it's including all stakeholders. And stakeholders means like whoever has to say something in the application lifecycle, they should be part of it. And automation is an engine pieces. That engine piece enables us to collect the right data sets to enable a feature deployment, feature delivery, to enable us as have iterative and incremental development throughout the lifecycle. That lifecycle has automation every phases. So we can eventually collect the feedback on each phases of the things we are building. It can be a data throughout the requirements. It can be a data and throughout the development phases. And there are some data on the security testing phases. So all this data is actually building up feedback mechanisms to the stakeholders. The stakeholders are everybody, including security folks. It's not really just a developer. It's not just the business oriented or not operational people, or everybody else. With that mindset, DevOps is giving a complete engagement with all stakeholders. And also, if you have a good DevOps factory or DevOps pipeline, you should have a full transparent traceability across the life cycle. And furthermore, as a key benefits of DevSecOps, it's really changing the concept of what we are doing for the life cycle, or building from waterfall to the more DevOps concept. And if you guys remember the waterfall, it's more error in each phases, because it's kind of like a sharing the artifacts and the requirements to design, or the design to developers, or etc. So every phases change in application lifecycle or system lifecycle has errors in it, because typically in the waterfall eras, or if we are in a siloed organization, we are sharing artifacts as a complete system. That all artifacts either misunderstood from developer or misunderstood from an operational perspective, maybe completely disconnect from security folks as well. With the DevOps concept, we're able to make easy in a short time frame for the specific features to find out any errors, any cost involvement at pieces. Like specifically, the DevOps is really enable us to reduce any error during deployment. And also it's really helping us to deploy and resolve discovered errors quickly. I know it's a long list, I put it here. I don't want to explain every actions, but mainly it's giving us a repeatable process. It is giving us a continuity. It is also enabling us to find an errors quickly. One important element, it's especially for DevSecOps thought, it is enabling the developer and the security or all the stakeholder a time either to innovate or to learn stuff. So if you are spending, think about yourself as a developer, as I said, I have been writing a code. If I'm spending a time more on writing a code or understanding domain I'm in, I can have a better knowledge, I can have a better system of understanding, I can develop a better system, a secure system. If I spend my time for manual process, if I spend my time such as reporting capabilities, such as meetings, such as creating an Excel file, such as writing a manual test cases, these are really taking off my time and putting into the more manual stuff that is basically causing so much waste of my time, technical waste of. If I'm doing the same work twice, I should have automation script in perspective. So with DevOps thinking, with DevOps practice, with DevOps tooling, will help us to take time efficiently and have automation in place. As I said the previous slide, it is giving us a traceability as a very important factor of building a secure application, has a traceability of such as which things is working in a production environment, and know what type of tests we have done it so far, and what is the relationship to our organization risk policies and postures. And other things is important with DevSecOps concept. We would like to have a continuous feedback at the moment that we need an information. The feedback is not just the result of the tool, and feedback is also should come from a team, like a security team, like a designer, like other team member involved in the process, involved in building the system. They can give a timely input to things we are building. And timely input is going to come from the business is going to come from the user's perspective as well.
Now, in our research, we discovered 5 key challenges that we would like to share with you. These are high-level challenges, and what we're going to do is drill down deeper into every one of these. First, there's a lack of security assurance at the business and at the project levels. Second, we've got organizational barriers related to collaboration and tooling and even culture that get in the way. Third is the impact to quality, because security is simply not given a priority while systems continue to get increasingly more complex. Fourth, we found that we have a lack of security skills, not just for developers, but also for the business, for stakeholders in that domain, as well as auditors. And finally, we have insufficient security guidance due to lack of resources and standards and data. Now, even though we've outlined 5 challenges here, these are not intended to be driven in any particular order. They're simply 5 buckets that we've discovered in our research. And the way that we derived these 5 buckets was by conducting a systematic review of current research. We interviewed some people, we conducted surveys, and then we pulled all this information together to help us understand what are the challenges that folks are facing today in the realm of DevSecOps. So let's start with the first one, which is the lack of assurance. First of all, what do we mean when we say lack of assurance? Well, we're seeing 3 areas within assurance that sort of manifest themselves in this particular area. First of all, there's an overall lack of assurance model within certain industries. They just don't have it. Second, we have businesses themselves lack assurance around security. And we know that security is a board level issue today, but despite the work that's being done by technical teams, there still exists this lack of assurance. And finally, even at the project levels where teams are executing, we have a lack of assurance around security. So what we're going to do is start to take a look at actionable steps to counter or to address each of these challenges. So we've got 5 buckets, we've got 3 areas within each of those buckets, and we've got actionable steps. So there's plenty of information, and it will be actionable advice that you can carry forward. So for now, when we talk about the industry, what can we do to address this problem of the lack of assurance within the industry? What we advocate is just start getting involved. Join some informal working groups, start talking to your peers, attend conferences, network with them, share your experience. What did you learn? What have they learned? And work with others to extend this body of knowledge that we currently have. It's interesting, I was having a conversation with a former regulator, and he was sharing with me how many times people wait for a standard or a regulation to emerge. And unfortunately, the people that are involved with making these regulations, with creating these regulations, don't have the technical expertise required. And so it takes a very long time for these regulations to eventually come out. Instead, his recommendation was that players within a given industry get together and start to form particular self-governing standards. And these can then in turn be used by the regulators to enforce. So don't wait, get involved. From a business perspective, we also see this lack of assurance around security. Focus on the fundamentals. This is the primary objective here. This means identify the threats, understand the business drivers, and then balance these two. If you focus only on the threats, you're going to ignore what the business deems important. And if you focus simply on the business drivers, then you're going to ignore the threats. So you're going to have to balance these two and try to align the business needs and understand what they're looking for. So typically we see things like time to market or cost savings or resiliency. And also conduct external audits to provide assurance back to the business. Understand the business context in terms of the competitive landscape. What are they doing? Identify, link, rank business and technical risks. This is the way the business thinks. And to identify these kinds of risks, figure out what's really important. What's that low-hanging fruit? And get these security requirements early into the conversation. Define some kind of a risk mitigation strategy once you've identified what these risks are. And if we know we have certain risks, educate the management, executives, and get them on board. This really is a significant gap. So, help them understand in non-technical language why something is really important. And when it comes to engaging in pilot projects, get your more senior technical people involved to work with the security teams. This will avoid this back and forth and the churn, and it sort of derails early stage implementations. And it will give you the necessary expertise to just make sure that things go smoother. And finally, make security part of your technical reviews. Spread the word. Give them a platform to teach others as well. And finally, we have projects that also lack assurance. What can we do about this? Start mapping the reporting data from your tools as a starting point. Get a continuous view of the value that you're getting at each stage of your tool chain. This implies, of course, that the data from these tools are somehow connected to key relevant security metrics. Run some security tools on all the code and measure your code quality in your standards. Provide the assurance from a release perspective that you've done the due diligence. Review your code changes for security and document approvals prior to release. Use dedicated testing resources in the case of significant changes. And this might seem like something that will slow you down, but it will really save you a great deal of headache in long term if you ever get audited. So conduct some code reviews and look at your code from a maintainability and security perspective. And finally, expose your security teams to the metrics. Collaborate with them. And in some cases, understandably, this might be difficult to do, but we'll talk later about how culture can be addressed as well.
So after the great explanation for lack of assurance, the first one, the second one is organizational barriers. It's very related to all together, like we mentioned, the challenges, but all complementing each other. The organization barriers has 3 areas that we find that you may have more areas in it, but mainly we see a poor stakeholder collaboration and also lack of integrating pipeline security, like a developer may have a different pipeline versus security team has a different pipelines, not making a security priority as organizational thought as a domain knowledge. So starting from the poor stakeholder collaborations, it's the nature of the DevSecOps. So the nature of DevOps, we should have really communicated, we are saying it. But how is there really a challenging point in terms of collaborating and including security folks, and how can we collaborate that? Then a couple actions we will listed here. The first one is to document your current state, that what are we going to do, what type of silos we are in silos in development and what infrastructure security. I'm not saying that writing a complete SRS or STD, but we would like to have some sort of a current state, what we are doing it. Because when we have a documented information that we have by the security postures or the organization we are in terms of compliances, if it is a shareable format with the developers, that's where we can start it. Like should be maybe specific to the features that developer will be writing and then the code, what type of security requirements or the organizational requirements that developers should know about it, maybe the compliances. So typically what I have been seeing so far, people are really sharing a documentation. It's not a digestible format to developer. Like don't give a NIST 800-53 documentation has a 450 pages to developers. The documentation should be really digestible for developers, like using a wiki page as an example, or you may be using a SharePoint example, how you share it. When you share documentation, that you are building a collaboration between security and the dev team. That's how it starts. And then typically I said, like the security, our people are really sharing a pen testing results. It's great, it's documented, but it's not a usable format for dev team. let them collaborate and see what developer needs and with respect to security. And be ready for not really changing to the workflow, but make sure that the workflow will help us to get a better collaboration, better working environment. So that collaboration pieces, that sharing information will help us to build up a continuous security mindset. If we put the right knowledge, information with the stakeholders from the beginning, there is a way to build up a continuous security mindset. It's not a day job, it takes a time. And it takes a time to understand where we are in. It takes a time to understand what type of knowledge and security requirements, in which is going to cover up in a couple challenges as well. So we can build up by sharing, by collaborating, by really having a cultural thought, not blaming the people for their making mistakes, just help them to understand what was wrong and how can we fix it. Like an example, if you're a security folk, you're listening to this webinar, please don't treat your developer as know nothing. Developer, they're not trained by knowledge. They don't know that. Change that culture and help them, give the guidance to help and to better write secure coding, to understand what they are doing it. So change that, the blame culture, make it more a culture as lesson learned culture, more helping cultures. And of course, we really maybe not be scale enough, but definitely get the security folks into the dev team. Doesn't mean maybe have a physical people has to be every dev team, but the security team can be part of dev team by using the right integrated pipeline, which you're going to cover up in the second areas. So it will help us to build up the team and then scale up with a security mindset in it. So let the security team is part of virtually of the dev team. So in other actions, then we will suggest having an integrated pipeline security. What things we can do? What that mean integrating pipeline security? If the DevOps environment is not integrated, what that means, if your software development environment has a repository management system that you have it, but if your repository management is not really talking with your issue tracking systems, then you may have a SaaS tools, which you have to include it in your continuous integration pipeline, SaaS tools, DAS tools, stat analysis tools, dynamic analysis tools. If tool is not able to give the feedback to developers on time, if you remember the benefits of DevOps, you have a continuous feedback, right? So the pipeline should enable the tool, us including the team member, including tools, then give the feedback on time to developer. Developer will understand what is really wrong, what needs to be changed. So one approach is sharing result of your scanning tools, maybe using a Ford, maybe something else. Typically, static analysis tools, when they run it, you will have more than 40 pages of report, maybe 30 pages. It depends on the complexity of your systems. If you have an integrated pipeline, you should be able to get the result and direct it back to developer through the chat environments or issue tracking system, maybe some wiki pages. That will help us to have a traceability of the requirements against the test case that has been done. And also other things, we really collect the metrics. If you don't know your the MTTR, like mean time to recovery or the vulnerable escape rate, how much you assess where you are in terms of security. It's not just looking for tests, but we look what has been done before, how much we advance, and are we able to find out the incremental changes, and how much we are able to repeat that incidents or cases. Because if you're able to find out the data based on the testing, and if you're able to find the traceability, if something happens to your production environment, you can easily go back and find out and patch it immediately based on what you had it before. So making exercise a lot makes you easily and support it, and then have a quick response. And also look for different approaches like creating an abuse case, creating architecture analysis at the beginning of application design and requirements gathering. So when you have a requirements gathering for a system, we typically write the functional requirements. And we using a use cases. Use cases typically that the user would like to do, but as a security mindset, we look for the abuse cases. What things can go wrong in the systems? If I'm a adversary person, how can I take an advantage of the systems I'm building? That typically this knowledge exists with the security teams. And as I mentioned, the first collaboration pieces of the areas that we can collaborate, getting a security mindset, that's how it starts. And typically if developer architect, they're not taught, they're not trained creating abuse cases. The security teams knows already. So let them share the possible scenarios they were using, maybe pen testing. So pen testing, maybe they have some sort of cases. tie that pen testing cases to abuse case that's going to help to build up the environments and build up that collaboration pieces. Of course, we have to design security at the beginning, not really at the end. And statistically, and if you look at any thoughts, any analysis in the reports, we have been seeing that if you're able to design systems securely, we are technically eliminating 50% of vulnerabilities by design. Another 50% is basically based on the bugs in the systems that can be covered up through the testing scenarios. Some of the design problems we may not be able to cover up because it's very difficult to test. It's kind of like you may find that later on, it will be very difficult to come back and change the design. So think about security at the first thought at the beginning of designing the right system, like think about list privileges and think about defense in depth, make it some modular, and make sure you have a probable this fail safe defaults and you have a right initialization of memory variables, etc. And of course, we have to automate any possibilities of the testings and any possibilities of the manual process. We should automate that. So all this really depend on having an integrated pipeline. You cannot have all these components if you don't have integrated pipeline. What integrated pipeline means, you should have a source control in middle, so like repository management, either your test cases or maybe the security cases. Everything should be part of your repository management, so we have a full traceabilities. Maybe it can be extreme, but I saw a great example. Even writing a requirements can be a text file. Text file can be part of your source control. And then you should be able to really compare that what the requirement has been changed. You can really create that abuse cases based on documentation that'll be part of your source control. That all other the components in your pipeline should be talking to each other, like issue tracking system as an example, like communication systems. And again, the recall of the continuous feedback importance. If I'm building a system, if I'm doing the static analysis test as part of my CI server, if I have just the CI server and then repository management, this is not ideal way because we would like to have a result immediately report to the developers. And that result can be in the communication system, maybe a chatbots, maybe a chat apps, maybe you have a chat environment you have. Build up that system is talking directly with your build environment. Of course, we should have the monitoring systems and other integration environments. So overall, this is kind of like abstracted thing. We really would like to have a fully integrated pipeline so we can insert any tools into that pipeline will enable us to automate it, enable us to run any testing tools in analysis, and also collect the data and share amongst the team members. So last areas here is making security a priority. It's kind of related, but really build up a culture that everybody think about security as the number one priority. Usually, 99% I have been seeing so far in a part of SCI, and then I'm seeing the similar thing with DoD, it looks like we are saying it as security, but we are not implementing. It's a cultural thinking. It's basically sharing information. It's sharing the thoughts and sharing mindset, making security a responsibility, priority in whatever we are doing it. Like if we are doing any type of a daily scrum, we should add the security requirements with our daily scrum. And we really understand why is it important. We don't understand why is that important for organization, what type of compliances we are in, and what type of compliance we should be part of it. And build up the knowledge, build up the reason why the security is important. And then again, we mentioned before, embed the security into the ops team and also the same as dev team. And typically the developers are, if they're doing agile work, if they're doing any type of sprint or the scrum, whatever the techniques they're using as part of agile methodologies, if they have a chance as a developer are doing the post-mortem analysis, invite the security teams, making the priority of that teams is going to come and tell what can go wrong and share that information. And make it a small, don't really try to boil the ocean. Think about any security requirement as the module, as the function that you're working on it. Then increment, and as incremental, then you can add the new features. Then think about the security as part of that features. So how we are thinking as a developer, how we are thinking as a business-wise, that we have to do better quality of the product, we have to find the better customers. We should think about, we should say, like, we would like to build up a secure system. We would like to build up a resilient systems. And that the resilient system will enable us to really build up the strong systems and environments, and how then gradually we can build up the knowledge and share amongst the team members.
I think we're just going to pause for a moment. Shane, do we have a question that someone has
Yeah,
asked?
so a question coming through on the chat. Do you feel that these organizational concerns or challenges are new in the DevOps world, as these challenges can be the same even in a waterfall model? Your comments.
I'll certainly take that first, and then Hassan, you're welcome to provide your commentary on this as well. So when we take a look at, first of all, moving from waterfall to DevOps, the profound difference there is the development cycles are significantly shortened. So you're still conducting the SDLC, no question about that, but it's just the time that it takes to go through the SDLC with each iteration is smaller. And so when we get into DevOps, we shift the mindset from this big bang approach to continuous everything, essentially. So we're looking at continuous integration or continuous deployment or continuous requirements management, and so we're trying to get really to a point where we have the opportunity to provide feedback back to the business and be able to really afford to support them as best we can. So that was the shift from waterfall to DevOps. Now, when we go from DevOps to DevSecOps, the introduction of security into this, what that does is it now introduces this notion of continuous compliance, continuous security, continuous risk management. And these are not things that we have traditionally looked at from a waterfall perspective. So while we are doing at one level the SDLC, the fact that we are moving into a much quicker cadence and moving into a continuous everything model, in some cases, it's amplifying the need for automation. And in some cases, as we'll talk about later, the differences go even beyond the project level and start to hit the program level. And we'll talk about what kind of a change that means. So to respond to that question, yes, there are some things that are the same when you look at it from an SDLC perspective, but keep in mind the differences become amplified when you consider this from a continuous perspective. Hassan, do you have any additional thoughts?
Yes, I have extra couple of these. Thanks for the explanation, Altaz. I like that. So a couple things I would like to add here. I'm going to go back to models. So when we do more integrations, more about the tooling perspective, in the community, DevOps people are thinking, I have to deliver quick and fast and fast. We ignore the security. That's the challenge. It's coming in the DevOps. I don't say like maybe a side effect of DevOps. I can call that like not thinking security as well. How they're building continuously, how building up a systems, ignoring security elements. That's a new challenge. So other things like the sharing and transparent, it's the same. And then what we would like to do, the challenging wise, and think about the DevOps way that we like to have a more business-oriented, more quick features that we have to deploy it. And developers, we're going to cover up in a couple challenges as well in slides. Developers are not taught as the security number one priorities, or developers are not aware of any dependence they were using it, or developers are really getting tools or the libraries open source and put in their environment. So because the notion is get quick, get fast. Quick and fast doesn't mean we have to ignore security. That's a challenge pieces. And I have been seeing so many environments, so many people are doing DevOps ignoring security. DevOps is if you do the proper way of building implementation of DevOps, it should help us to build up a secure systems. But how? That's the organization challenges that we see. There's a couple other challenges as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to the.
Okay, so looking at the next broad bucket, what we also found was the lack of quality. And when we broke down the lack of quality, we found that there were 3 areas within that bucket. The first is that security is just brought in too late. So here we're equating security with quality. Second, we have a lack of confidence in the release. And finally, just an ongoing system complexity issue. Over time, things get more complex. So putting all of these together, how do you mitigate, first of all, against bringing security in too late? What we need to do is shift this conversation and start to take a look at it really from the point of view of not looking at security as an add-on, but really looking at security as part of what our day-to-day software development is going to be all about. So what that means is we start, just as we've got requirements coming in early, we need to get compliance, these security requirements, functional, non-functional requirements, just as we always have. And then we tie these compliance objectives into providing assurance back to the business. Just as we've got traceability to our regular functional requirements, we also have these security requirements that are traceable. And that's where this link between security and quality really converge. As you're developing, test compliance against the security policies to identify the gaps. And if there are gaps, make sure you communicate these gaps clearly, and you consider what kind of risk mitigation strategy you're going to recommend. Regarding the releases, many project teams really aren't comfortable. When time comes for any kind of a release, they're kind of crossing their fingers, and they're just hoping that everything will go well. And the way that we manage this is to instill this risk-based security testing. So as you consider your backlog and you break it down into several releases, each release will have its own set of tasks. And when you test these tasks, look at it from that risk perspective. Test your high-risk tasks first. Shift that conversation from cabs and phase gates to something that is really more around compliance-driven releases. Which parts of a standard did we not fully comply with? What security gaps still exist? And automate the reporting. Try to go from manual checking towards more frequent and automated audits. You can conduct, for example, automated testing from a dev perspective, and then when the dev checks in the code, you have a code scanner run to identify any gaps and to catch what was missed during the dev phase. Audit yourself continually and establish these security requirements from a traceability perspective. And really, these things ultimately map back to what Hassan was talking about earlier, or how all these things now tie together, and you start ending up with this translation of security policies into executable tasks that the DevSecOps teams can now execute on. And the final area that we brought out was around system complexity. Trying to manage the ongoing complexity of these applications, it's a real challenge. So you need to identify some kind of a proxy metric for complexity. So for example, it might be number of issues that you find in production, or time to deploy an application, things like that. And you want to try to reduce the complexity of the application and drive these security policies by integrating these security tasks in the early stages of the pipeline, and then managing that as you go through the pipeline. And if it's taking too long, consider whether you could simplify your application.
So when we come to the lack of security skills, so we talk about organization, we talk about the lack of assurances, but end of the day, people are building the systems. People are acquiring, people are and designing the systems, or people are bringing the business to us. So it's basically defining that maybe you can expand it more, kind of like all stakeholders here. We have a business, developer, and auditors that can be expanded. Think about the same approach. We can expand more other stakeholders. So I'm going to start from the business folks. Typically, business folks, they don't really aware of any risk and quality. We really teach them and then make them aware of and building up a business risk in terms of the response with the security. Like, what is the value of risk? What is the value relationship with the security? When we're talking about the risk, it's basically a security. If we know how much risk we can tolerate it, and we can build up a secure systems or a secure environment based on risk we can tolerate it. Like if you are in the healthcare industry, the healthcare industry has a different type of compliance, a different type of risk requirements versus financial industry. That's going to tell us how much we do the security, like more specifically, and how much we can do for PII data with respect to the HIPAA, with respect to financials. And which data is important to us to encrypt it or not encrypt it. And it's going to really driving for us to build up a secure system based on the compliances, based on risk we have. There's a direct connectivities with the business risk and to the security value, which basically help us build up a business awareness with the secret information in it. Other thing I would like to call here as well If our business analyst is looking for a build up a system or maybe building a new product, we always maybe dealing with the customers. We would like to say what are the security requirements are, and it looks like a default. But if something goes wrong, and typically the end users or business are saying we should have told it before. Maybe it's a default, but we have to specifically mention it and say that it's a kind of like the skills it's important, and we have to like train that. And developers, it's a huge list here. I know it's going to say why it's a lot. Because developers, engineers, and I am teaching at the CMU as well, it is not taught in undergrad level, honestly. It's not everywhere. It is basically engineers are learning how to build up systems, it's reliable systems, even though security is the one of the quality attributes or the architecture attributes, but developers are not trained with writing a secure code. There's a practical reasons. I have been thinking like there is a reason because developers are learning how to build resilient, how to build up systems by writing developing algorithms maybe, or they're learning database design or operational system design or something like that. But security is really dynamic because you may teach something today, but the security may change in terms of how the system can be exploited, how things can be done. It may evolve. So it's a living things. And it is really requiring to get information with the domain you are in. And also it's requiring information that what type of systems you are trying to build it. And then also what type of language you are going to use it. And that's really a learning journey. We should really start to teach the developers and build up a secure systems by teaching them. So how can we do that really teaching developers? The couple of things you can do. And if you have a once a year type of training, it's not effective. Because you're just getting to train your developer. If they're not practicing it, they will forget it. So if you are looking for training, it should be on time. Let the system is going to train. Let the security team train the developers, or giving an instant message or messaging or some sort of a guidance, and developer will learn. Like a couple of practical example. If you're using any SaaS tools, maybe using some type of IDEs, let IDE or the SaaS tool will help the developer to write a better code, giving you references. Like if there's a SQL injection error is happening in your test cases, maybe you find out something. One way you can say, hey, there is a SQL injection here. Another way, here is how to solve it. And third way is, here are the references. So let the developer learn by seeing the data and by seeing that the result directly from the system, so we can increase that knowledge. And also you can build up a cultural, which we discussed before, build up a security champion cultures maybe. Build up that culture, promote that learning. Promote learning that developer will learn from each others, and which code review can help. And also having a security team in the team will help. And also getting a data directly from the results of any test cases will help the developer to train them. So it's kind of like a journey. It's not a day job. It has to be a continuous learning skills. And we can build up a knowledge in the developer. They can write a better and then secure code and better systems eventually. So last one is areas, auditors. So auditors as really looking for the evidence, right? Typically when auditor comes to the environment looking for something as evidence, like test results maybe. If you are information resource person, they will look for the secure test results. Build up a good relationship and tell them what are the security requirements are. So the relationship not only for DevOps, now we're going to build up with the auditors and train them what type of information they're getting it, the report, what the report means for them, and then explain what the security relevance of that reports and what type of information is related to the compliances and what the compliances relate to the risk and that is driving the security. And also get familiarization with the common standardization like the NIST 800-53s and ISO and OWASP will literally help the auditors what they're assessing, and also it will help the rest of the team members what type of domain they are in. So overall, it's really a shared collaborations and build up learning cultures with the business, with developers, with auditors, and you can expand it more different areas as well.
So the fifth bucket that we have here is this lack of security guidance. And the root cause of these are lack of security resources, lack of security standards, and the lack of proactive monitoring. Now, to counter these challenges, you want to aim for that long-term sustainability. you've got to build a team of resources that are committed to security. So when you come back in the future and you take a look at the changes you've made, are these changes still there? Are they still implemented? And the way to achieve this again is start small, implement a policy that's relatively easy to manage, and then gradually grow from there. Map these policies to domain-specific procedures that you have, let's say for a dev context or for testing. And the goal here is to organically spread security responsibility across multiple people. There simply aren't enough people that understand security today, and you can't hire enough people to manage the entire security problem. So you have to try and see, look for ways to manage that load. Secondly, we also see this lack of security standards. And these standards could be external to the organization, or they might be something internal. We had mentioned the auditors. There may be an internal audit team that may set some of these standards. And when I've spoken to some teams, and I've been a part of some teams as well, they don't know where to start. So if you need a starting point, use a well-known framework, maybe something like OWASP Top 10. Create a few policies around that. Aim for some of the low-hanging fruit. So you could typically start either with CI or testing. That's typically where I've seen it start. And then measure security practices against what you have today. And then go from there, looking either upstream or downstream in your SDLC for the next easiest place to implement security. And then bake these policies into the workflow so that you don't go back and regress to an unsecure state. Finally, we have this lack of proactive monitoring. So what you want to do is start where you're at. Internal teams probably have some kind of operational logging. It's very common for that to be there. Start there before doing anything major with acquisition of some expensive tools or things like that. Sometimes people have this notion that if I put the right tool in, that it's going to help me do DevSecOps. You're better off starting with where you're at and gradually growing up. Update your security documentation, including your trust boundaries, your threats, your components. And what you want to do is move away from being largely reactive to security incidents into slowly turning the tide and becoming more proactive. Now, what we described to you so far are the 5 areas. And what you see in front of you is just a general framework that you can use to help you manage your gaps in DevSecOps. We can use this to first assess our gaps, identify some quick wins. So, in this kind of a framework, you can imagine that you can very easily construct like a heat map, figure out where the quick wins are, put a team around managing that change, empower these champions, and then start to measure these results through the metrics. And then repeat the cycle and take on more of these areas.
So once you have an environment, you may have another challenges. So you had a great DevSecOps and Rami, you build it, and one is really not effective usage. Another one is maintaining an environment. Because I have seen in organizations, and you have, like maybe you are one of them, you had a great environment, you build it, but if the people they don't know how to use it, the environment will be useless. So that means you have to really train your users and to build up their DevOps skills. Like as we discussed it before, and it's about the collaborations. And if your environment is not enabling that collaborations, or if your team, they don't know how to collaborate, they don't know how to use issue tracking system, an example, if they don't know how to use a chat environment, will really disable for any type of work for them. And then will be difficult for really use an environment you spend money and you spend the time to build it. And also the environment should be all stakeholder accessible. Like if you're the business folks not able to access an environment, if your auditor not able to see your issue tracking systems, there's no point that, like, it's not effective usage. And when you're hiring a new developers or a new team members, let them really go to that environment or the guidance they will start use right away. Or they can really get a cheat sheets about an environment, cheat sheets about the tools they were using it, and where things are, how the tool is configured, and where the repositories are, how you start the project, and what type of architecture guidance they have to be aware of it. Like if the organization are using a Docker container, maybe a Kubernetes, and then they need to understand what type of available container services are, and what type of common services available for them. Maybe previously the one of the container has been developed and has been verified already. Let's check it out. Instead of recreating that container, let them use it. Let them use and sharing. And what type of architecture patterns do you have to have it? What type of test methods going to use? So this has really helped to build up effectively using in an environment. And also the other things, and then should be a policy, like how the build deployment strategies are. Like more specifically, what is the build strategies? And how are we going to build the feature flag? How we do the kernel releases? And if you do that, what things we have to be aware of it in terms of configuration management. So these are the knowledge should be shared effectively in DevSecOps environments so people can use it. Other one is maintaining. So we build up great systems. If you don't maintain it, and will be vulnerable. Like in Jenkins, there was a couple years ago, actually 2 years ago almost, and there was one of the vulnerabilities in Jenkins environment was doing the data mining. So now if you need to update that Jenkins for a better, newer version, you may gonna break the build that people has it. So how are you gonna maintain an environment for a newer version of the Jenkins they're using as an example, and how are you gonna update other tools they're using it? So when you update the tools, and make sure that you're not going to break the things that are working already right now. So you may have a plan and test it out, maybe an environment, replica environment. So do the maintenance or the update process as an application, how you apply the application to the similar things for your DevSecOps environment. And other things you should be really aware of that maintaining, use the base OSs and have the open source system support as test harnesses or TAP environment creation. This is going to really help you to build up operational support. Like if the developer are building a systems, that system is going to use the Ubuntu at then, let them have using a base image that has been verified, validated from the security perspective. So you can really, as a security managers or the security professionals, you can manage only one golden image. That golden image can be used by everybody else in development team or your application lifecycle. Same thing for the container as well. And other things like make sure that you have a right proper meter building support if you're using an environment like a cloud environment, and be aware of that, how much is going to cost the money for you, because you may be surprisingly shocking the bill is going to high. Be aware of that type of components. And lastly, it's important factors. We talk about the auditor's perspective, and make sure that you have collecting a right data sets from your pipeline, like who's accessing your repository management, what are they doing it, and who's accessing your configuration management, who has the key holders into your environment, like maybe tokens, maybe a key that you have in your cloud environment, who is accessing, where it is stored, and how they are shared amongst each other. So because when auditor comes in, especially if you're talking about the GDPR, we have to show an evidence and what we do as work-wise, and what we do in terms of developer, why developers changing the code, due to the privacy by design. These are the evidence we can collect from environments, as the environment gives us a chance to build up the components.
So here's some additional links for you to explore beyond this webinar. That pretty much brings us to the end of the discussion. Thank you once again for taking the time to participate. Shane, I guess we'll hand it off to you at this point for some questions. I think we have some time.
Okay, yeah, and we will send this presentation out to all those who attended, so you can get these links, so don't worry about that. So yeah, thank you, Altaz and Hassan. That was really great. And thanks to everyone for patiently listening to these informed views about overcoming DevSecOps challenges. We probably have time for one question, I would think, if there are any. So if anyone has any questions, you can, type that in the Q&A. I'm actually not sure if we can unmute the audio lines for audio questions. So the Q&A chat is preferred. One question we are getting relatively often, how does DevSecOps fit into the broader enterprise in general, kind of perhaps beyond development and that kind of thing, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll certainly take that on first, and then what I'll do is hand it off to Hassan. When we generally talk about DevOps, usually the discussion is at the project level, where teams are executing given tasks and trying to work against certain releases. When we look at DevSecOps, immediately we're starting to take a look not just at the coordinating activities that need to happen above the software development lifecycle, where we've got now teams that need to coordinate between dev and ops activities, release management activities, and things like that. But it goes even further up now because we are no longer just involving technical teams. We are also involving compliance and risk teams and security teams and audit teams. So what really, when we look at it from a project and a technical perspective, we're looking at an application architecture that we're trying to unfold. When we look at DevSecOps and try and abstract DevSecOps a little bit here, it's really trying to get various business teams now working together to produce the kind of architecture that we need for deployment. And so now there's this intersection of the application architecture with the business architecture, and that's really fundamentally, when we look at the broader enterprise, it's trying to bring in these various teams, each which may have their own life cycles, their own processes, their own systems. How do we get these teams to talk to each other and just gradually begin to build in security into what we're doing from a software perspective? So that's what I'm seeing from how DevSecOps kind of fits into the broader enterprise. Hassan, you're welcome to offer your thoughts as well.
I'm going to do one thing here, Altaz, and people, I have been getting this question many times when I speak anywhere else in DevSecOps, even though my class too. In the enterprise scale, if you really think about it in a micro level, it's about the modules and subsystems we are building. So scalability starts from the bottom up. Think about the value, the business that you're getting, maybe a subsystems, maybe a systems. If your environment is able to do for the security is the beginning, then you can expand that, the thinking, either using the right environment, that the culture, and another layer, or another systems, another team. So end of the day, developer are building, not everybody's writing code at the same time, but we are, as a team, we are building the code. Like your dev team may be 5-6 people, another dev team are 5-6 people. So if you have a small team and practicing DevSecOps, you can expand it how it is done and organizationally, which is really requiring a higher up at now to let the teams are sharing. Now within the team, we talk about the sharing. Now organizationally, the teams are building the system, they will share that. So you can build up kind of like a scrum of scrum, or systems of systems, or pipeline of pipeline, and you can build up your own pipeline. You can build up your own DevSecOps notion within your small team, then expand that team to the next tier and next tier. So eventually you have an organizational mindset that does DevSecOps. Start from the really small team and expand it more. That's kind of implementation. So it's scalable. And many organizations did it, I saw it, and how they implement it, it's the affecting of scalability. If you try to impose from the beginning, it may not work. Start from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And that's all we have time for. So thanks again to both of our presenters, Hassan and Altaz. It's great to have experts such as yourselves here to answer these questions directly. Before we close off the webinar, we'd like to let you know that we'll be attending the Gartner Security and Risk Management Summit this year in June. So if any of you are attending the show, please drop by and we'd love to see you. So I think we can end this webinar. Another reminder that we'll be sending out the recording and slide deck to you all by the end of the week, and we'll follow up on any questions or comments we receive. So again, please don't hesitate to contact us about anything. Also, let us know if there's anything you'd like to see from us in the way of webinars or other content. You can reply to the webinar invite emails, or you can email info@securitycompass.com. So thanks again to everyone for attending this webinar. We hope this has been interesting for you, and we hope you have just a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again.